In the previous video, I spoke of arrays and dynamic arrays, and I introduced a little bit of lists and linked lists, and we'll get into coding those in a little bit. I don't want to sort of overwhelm you. I just want to make sure you understand these data structures. And so with a stack, so let me just off to the side, I'll draw kind of a preview of what's coming for you. So we've got arrays, and then we've got lists. And then so we have these other data structures called stacks and queues, and that's going to be what we're talking about in this video and the next. And so I want you to understand that what's going on here is that you build stacks and queues from arrays and lists. So when we're talking about stacks today, don't think that it's like an array or like a list. It's actually something that you build from an array or a list. So it's kind of higher level. So you can build a stack using an array. You can build a stack using a list. You can build a queue using an array or a queue using a list. So just keep that in mind that now we're going one level higher, and we're actually going to cheat a little bit initially, and we're going to use our STL again. We're going to use the standard template library, and they actually have a stack built for us that's built on one of these. I'm not sure which it's built on. My guess is it's probably arrays or vectors. Same thing as far as we're concerned initially right now. But so we're going to cheat a little bit, but you really eventually we're going to make our own stacks and queues, and don't worry about the coding too much. I'll really hold your hand on that and give you a lot of copy and paste code. So let's go ahead and just sort of understand what a stack is. Okay, so a stack. So I'm going to draw some memory again here. And so remember that when we're dealing with C++, the stack is actually going to be a class, and so it's going to have we're going to have a stack class, and then we're going to have some operations on that. Okay, so that's good enough. And so say we have, and so think about, as I mentioned in the previous video, we have plates, and so we're actually going to start from the bottom here, and then we'll move up. And so imagine we have plates, and then if we want to add a plate, the operation is called push. And then the thing we want to push inside the parentheses, so let's just say it's a plate. We're going to push on there. And then what'll happen typically is, well, I won't get into the too many specifics just yet. So let's just say there's some method in the stack class called push. And when we push, we're putting a plate right here. And then so imagine loading it in from the top, and it falls till we hit the first available memory address. And then as we push plates, it just keeps on going up. And so what happens is, as I mentioned before in one of the other videos, this is known as a LIFO. Last in, first out. So in this case, this guy was the last in, so he's the first one out. Well, typically we're not gonna push plates. We're gonna, in our first examples anyway, we're gonna use numbers. So let me clear this out, and I'll rewrite LIFO here so you have that available. So instead of plates, imagine that we're pushing numbers. So I'm going to push, when I push the number 5, let's put that in I'm going to push 5. What happens? Well, it goes all the way down, and then we push 5 onto here. And then so we wanted to say we want to push another number. We wanted to push 7 on here. And then we wanted to push 11, and so on. It goes all the way up. When we want to retrieve these things, we can't just kind of poke poke our hand in here and grab any of them. We can only reach from the top. So that operation is there's actually two. So we have our push, and then the other to actually get the stuff off of it. We have two. Typically, you'll use pop, or depending on the implementation, you'll either see top, or sometimes you'll see it written as peak. And so what a pop does, it actually returns 11 and it gets rid of it, so that becomes available. So that's a pop, and that's in most traditional stack implementations you'll see a pop. From a practical point of view, sometimes we don't actually want to remove that thing. Sometimes we would just want to peek or just see what's on the top. So in that case, we would just look at what's on the top, but it would stay there. So understand the difference. When we do pop, imagine we're actually popping it off and we're actually getting rid of it. And so the next time we wanted to add something, we would add it in that memory just because it's now available. If we wanted to do a top or a peak, and we say we did a peak and then it returned 11 and we added something, well, it would add in this memory just right here because 11 is still there. So those are the main operations of a stack, and just sort of think about it as so the takeaway is make sure you understand last in, first out, and what we're saying the last thing in is the first thing out. So in this case, 11 was the last thing in. So when we call a pop operation, that's going to be the first thing out. Understand that when we're dealing with stacks, the operation to add to a stack, we push. And so keep in mind too, say we were say just, like I mentioned, we're going to use STL at first, but say we're making our own stack. And we just wanted to use an array, and so basically all we'd have to do is add to the end of the array. And so say we've got some array, and every time, and so say we've reserved 5 spaces, or if we're using a vector, we don't really even have to care about that. But so what you'd do is the push operation would add to the end. And so we just find out the last space that's been used. And so this, say we did a push of 5 and these were used, it would go right here. And then if we did a pop, what you typically have to do is keep track of internally the even though the array is sized for 5, we're only using 4 spots. So when we do a pop or a peak, this is the one we would this would be the LIFO. This one would be the last in, and it would be the first out. So keep all those things in mind. Like I said initially, just so you can kind of get used to using them, because really with all these data structures, there's 2 parts. There's the people that build the data structures, and then there's the people that use the data structures. And in your regular programming lives, you're going to be almost always using the data structures. In reality, it would be impractical for you to build a professional level STL data structure, because they're so incredibly complicated, and there's a huge amount of research that goes into these sorts of things, especially with big data companies like Amazon and Google. They pay employees that have done their doctoral dissertations and master thesis just on how to make these things as fast as possible and use as little memory as possible, and come up with all these complex, clever ways of using them. However, you still kind of have to understand a little bit of what's going on underneath the hood. So later in the class, what we'll do is, and as I said, it'll be mostly copy and paste code. We'll actually be building a very simple one. We won't have all the fancy speed and memory enhancements that you'd see in a typical one, but we can build a basic usable one just for our own purposes. But in reality, you're going to almost always be using STL, and most implementations like Microsoft's and on Linux, you'll be using with the GNU implementation. They're very fast, they're very good, and they're very simple to use once you understand how to use them.